Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nik, I don't think a lot of Valentine's Day cards were sent across the aisle in Parliament this week. The tone of debate has been, I guess, toxic, angry. What should we call it?
I don't know. Were there arrows? Like
No, little Cupid arrows? No.
Slings and arrows, just to be a little more literate. Wow, we're looking probably at what will be perhaps the most toxic, angry, combative parliament that we've seen in quite a while, because everyone is doubling down on issues. They're doubling down on the rhetoric. It's pretty clear that there's no why don't we even say there's not even any semblance of any kind of cordial behavior between especially between Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. And it's kind of like they're talking past each other. The reality is that for the two front-running parties, at least, the Liberals and the Conservatives, that they're actually speaking to their core voters. They're throwing basically red meat policy options to their core voters to fire them up in anticipation of an election. And you know what? I know there's an expectation that an election might not take place in as far off as 2025, but I'm looking at the fundraising, which is heating up. I'm looking at the rhetoric, which is heating up. It feels like there's going to be an election soon enough. And it's pretty clear that all of the parties are getting ready to be on election footing. So that toxic meter off the scale.
Well, let's just listen in on some of the exchanges we've heard so far lately.
Think of it. You now have to be a millionaire to be able to retire in this country after 8 years of this prime minister's inflationary deficits and taxes, after 8 years of doubling the cost of home heating with his carbon tax.
And yes, Mr. Speaker, there is more to do, which is why we're so surprised that the Conservative Party stood against extra supports for low-income renters, stood against supporting families to send their kids to dentists.
The Liberals have learned the wrong lesson from this hotel bill scandal. You'd think that after billing taxpayers $6,000 a night for a single room, the lesson learned would be book a cheaper room next time. Instead, the lesson these Liberals have learned is cover it up better.
Canadians pay some of the highest cell phone and internet fees in the world. The Rogers-Shaw merger will only make things worse. Canadians who are already struggling will have to pay even more for their cell phone and internet fees. Now, the government has a choice today. Will they stand up for families and say no to this merger, or will they put billions of dollars in the pockets of billionaires? Which is it?
So yes, the toxicity meter, Nik, is pretty high there. I'm curious also, you're hinting that, they're sort of gearing up for an election. Where's the ballot tracking at now?
Well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. The Conservatives had an advantage, upwards of a 5 or 6 point advantage over the Liberals in the last couple of months. But, check out the trend line. So first of all, let's look at the trend line. And when you look at the trend line, you see the Conservatives pulling ahead of the Liberals, and now the Liberals closing the gap. And when we look at the board, where we look at the actual percentages, we can see that it is absolutely a dead heat between the Liberals and the Conservatives, both of them at 33 percentage points support each. But look at the change over the last 4 weeks. Liberals up 4, Conservatives down 3. NDP are 21, which is in a good position for the NDP because that keeps them in the striking zone to stay in the 20s. Bloc at 6, Green Party at 4, People's Party still a factor at 3% nationally. So it probably explains, what I'll say, the edge that we are seeing in the House of Commons, and what I'll say the confrontational politics and messaging, especially from the Liberals and the Conservatives, because it's basically a knife fight in a telephone booth, and they're going at each other because it is very tight right now when we look at the top ballot numbers.
Nik, as I can see from the ballot tracking, the Liberals have had a little bit of a bounce lately, and to tie them up with the Conservatives. How much of that is their healthcare funding deal with the provinces?
Well, I think the focus, maybe not just the deal, but the focus of the Liberals on healthcare has helped move their numbers up. And the reality is who's been in the news on healthcare? Justin Trudeau? What about Pierre Poilievre? Yes, there are crickets playing. Pierre Poilievre has been largely absent from the discussion on healthcare. So he's kind of ceded territory to the Liberals. It's been a bit of a, regardless of whether you like or hate the Liberals, it's been a bit of a Liberal infomercial on them trying to do something on healthcare. The fact of the matter is they did pony up more cash. It was not as much as the provinces wanted, but you know what? It's the job of a premier of every province to say that it's not enough. So people are kind of used to that. But, the interesting thing is that when we look at the issue tracking in the last while, you can see that healthcare is clearly pulling away from all of the other issues. Right now, in the Nanos tracking, we have healthcare at 22 points nationally, up about 5 points in the last 4 weeks, followed by inflation at 13, jobs at 12, the environment at 11. Stuff like debt still there at 3, and housing and free speech, 3% at 3%. But the key takeaway here is healthcare has been on the rise as a top national issue of concern. Justin Trudeau has been in the news all the time and has been the center of the focus on the healthcare discussions and funding for healthcare. He did come up with some coin for the premiers. The premiers are accepting that coin. And what you see basically is Liberal numbers showing positive movement over the last 4 weeks with this focus on healthcare.
It seems like Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, his main attack point has been cost of living and inflation, which actually brings me to our next segment, Nik. I wanted to talk about a survey you did on homelessness and how worried Canadians are about housing costs.
Yeah, this is a new survey that was just recently released. It's for the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and we have tracking numbers. And these are really eye-popping numbers to look at. Sadly, why don't we just say sadly eye-popping numbers? We'd ask Canadians about whether they're worried or not worried about paying for housing in the next 30 days, and check out the trend. We can see 2023, 2021, 2020. Right now, in the survey that was just completed in the last couple of weeks, about 1 out of every 4 Canadians are worried or somewhat worried, that 18 and 16%. But check it out compared to 2021 and 2020. In 2020, you can see about 5% of Canadians were worried, another 11% were somewhat worried, so 16%. So we're up from 2020 a full 8 percentage points, which is a significant increase. And, just think of it this way. Back in 2020, we were looking at that 16%. We said that was bad. So it speaks to the fact that if you walk down your neighborhood, you see 4 of your neighbors, 1 of your neighbors is worried about whether they're going to be able to pay for housing in the next 30 days.
It matches a recent Statistics Canada report, Nik, that something like a quarter of Canadians say that they couldn't afford a surprise $500 bill in the next month. That presumably a lot of them are living paycheck to paycheck.
Absolutely. And, the other thing is that we know with other research that we've done for CTV News that Canadians are also worried about just paying for the groceries, that younger people, there's some younger people that are actually eating less because they're worried about paying for the bills. But in the same survey for the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, the other thing is that people overwhelmingly believe that homelessness is on the rise in Canada. And, I think something like 1% think that it's not on the rise or the same. So people know, and they see that many individuals in their neighborhoods are having difficulty paying for the bills. They're having difficulty paying for groceries, they're having difficulty paying for the rent, paying for the mortgage. They're just getting squeezed. And, the optimism for 2023 isn't there because we don't know whether there might be a mild or what type of downturn there might be in the economy and what will happen with interest rates.
I'm curious also, Nik, in the same survey you've done, I think you also asked people if there should be some sort of federal initiative to possibly to help out here.
Yeah, and it looks like people want action on homelessness and support for those that are in most need. But wow, if when we get to 1 out of every 4 people struggling to pay the bills, that's a lot of Canadians, And, the thing is, think of it this way, the federal government coming off of the pandemic sent a clear signal to Canadians saying that, there can't be unlimited support. So people see that there's a need, people see that they want action, but how is that going to slam up against the fiscal reality that we're going to see in this federal budget, and what the Liberals will do? The other thing is the other big question mark, and this is important for whether Parliament ravels or unravels with the New Democrats and the Liberals specifically, is what will the NDP want on healthcare, and what will they want to see happen on things like homelessness? Because the thing is, if they get grumpy and if their numbers start going up, that could precipitate a potential election if they see that the Liberals are not going far enough in advocating for a progressive agenda.
Oh, that's an interesting point, Nik. So the governing deal, I suppose, that the NDP has with the Liberals is supposed to go until 2025, but in your latest ballot tracking, I think the NDP is around 20% support. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why the NDP are going to be the ones to watch. Think of Jagmeet Singh. I don't want to use the word puppet master because that would be not exactly right. But he's got leverage. Jagmeet Singh has leverage. And he's going to have more leverage. And that's why the Liberals have to be worried, because when those NDP numbers go up into the mid-20s, whenever they go up into the mid-20s, the Liberals start losing seats to both the New Democrats and the Conservatives. So expect Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre to not attack each other, but expect them to double team Justin Trudeau in order to split voters, to create those opportunities for both the Conservatives and the NDP to pick up seats at the expense of the Liberals, especially in Ontario. That's where the Liberals can really be at risk in Ontario to some of these vote splits, and British Columbia.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, NORAD shooting down UFOs. Nik, so we've had some unexplained aerial phenomenon over Canadian airspace and American airspace. There's allegations that they're Chinese surveillance balloons, and they've been shot down by NORAD fighter jets. I'm curious if this is sort of a boost for NORAD in the minds of Canadians.
Well, I don't recall a Canadian jet shooting down the object over the Yukon.
No.
Right? It would be like, yeah, you could imagine if the French and the British had some type of threat, and the British said to Emmanuel Macron, yes, could we have the French Air Force shoot down that object that's over over England, please, because we just like you to do that. Well, that's basically what happened. There's no real explanation by the government. It was pretty quiet as to why we couldn't even protect our own territorial space. So I think that puts a spotlight, but then it also puts a spotlight on the relevance and importance of NORAD. And the good news is that both the Trudeau administration and also the Biden administration have started to make NORAD a little more of a focus, and North American air defense. So that's the good news, and this is precipitated. But you know what? If we thought the relationship with China was in the tank before, yikes, it's like worse, because now there's the narrative of the Chinese sending things. Why don't we let's get out of what they might actually be, but sending things over North America, and at least the authorities in North America not being happy with with those things occurring. And the Chinese have also claimed that there are objects that the Americans have floating over China. So it's not necessarily there is a bit of murkiness in all of this, and what is being shot down. These are unidentified objects. We won't say whether they're aliens or not, right? Because I don't think there's been they're not taken to what is it, Area 54? Is that it?
Area 51, I believe.
Area 51. Sorry, yeah. I know. Sorry for the mistake. I don't think anybody's being taken to Area 51 with any aliens. But the fact of the matter is that I think the key takeaway here is that North American airspace and the integrity of North American airspace is now on the radar, no pun intended. And it was never really on the radar before, and hasn't been for quite a long time. Because at that time we were worried about incursions from the Russians. So I think this is. I think the good news about this is that NORAD's back on the radar, and that there'll probably be a good look between both the American government and the Canadian government on what NORAD needs in order to fulfill its core mission.
You hinted that, or you said that it was an American fighter jet, of course, that shot it down over Canadian airspace. Now we've finally inked a deal to get F-35 fighter jets, but that's been a political football, the procurement of fighter jets, that's been kicked down the field for a long time. And it just seems like there hasn't been a lot of political will to sort of increase our defense budget and to put in, a lot of buying power into procuring new fighter jets.
Yeah, well, the reality is that for any defense procurement, these are exceptionally long time horizons. It's not like you can, get masks or vaccinations within so many months. Takes, we're talking about decades. And the thing is that what happens is, and it's just the state of political play. This is no reflection on whoever happens to be the prime minister and whoever happens to be the government, is that you have these long-term investments and then they slam up against short-term needs, right? So they slam up against the pandemic. They slam up against a potential recession. They slam up against, providing social aid to Canadians and trying to fight homelessness and stuff like that. So, but the reality is that we need governments to make long-term decisions and commitments so that we have the resources to maintain our national territorial integrity, our continental territorial integrity with the United States, and also to maintain our commitments with NATO. And, Ukraine has put a big spotlight on, the importance of countries maintaining their kind of their commitments to NATO, because the thing is that it's basically shown that everyone has to step up, and the thing is, with a couple of exceptions, most NATO allies are in the same spot. Mm-hmm. Germany needs to spend more money. A lot of the other major allies could spend more money, and that there's only a minority that kind of spend at or above that GDP target.
Nik, I think we're going to leave it there for this episode. As always, thanks very much.
Take it easy.